Hi everyone, I'm so excited to present to you Romeo and Juliet. This would be the introduction that I would give to you if we were in school. So we're going to be missing a little bit of the give and take, with the discussion that we have back and forth. But if you watch this PowerPoint and you have any questions, you can always email me and then I can get back to you. So we are going to learn a little bit about Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. And it says an introduction to William Shakespeare's tragedy. Lead us to our next slide that shows the mask of comedy and tragedy, which represents drama and theater. The definition of tragedy is a dramatic work that has a serious or sad theme. It has a character that has many problems or weaknesses. A tragedy usually ends with the downfall or death of a character or characters. Now you might be thinking, geez, Miss Lopresti, you just gave away everything. No, not necessarily. I'm just saying that a tragedy is not going to end well. It doesn't always end with the death of somebody, but it usually is the downfall of someone. And usually the downfall is brought about by that character's traits, something that they have that's innate to them in their character, their actions, their behaviors, their thoughts. And we would call that a fatal flaw. So sometimes a character would be very egotistical, and we would say that that character is filled with a lot of pride. And sometimes that pride will not allow them to see things very clearly. And because of that one fatal flaw, that character trait, it might lead to their downfall. And in that case, we potentially have a tragedy on our hands. So what tragedies have you read or watched lately? Did you see a movie lately about a character that had a really good life and everything seemed to be going well, but they just couldn't seem to get their act together? Something just kept coming back to haunt them, and it just led to their downfall and their own self-destruction? Because if that's the case, then you probably watched a tragedy. So we are going to look at two things in this play, and we're going to look at the question, can love ever be dangerous? So we're looking at unrequited love and star-crossed lovers. So what is unrequited love? Unrequited love, or one-sided love, is love that is not openly reciprocated or understood as such by the beloved. The beloved may not be aware of the admirer's deep and strong romantic affection, or they may consciously reject it. So you have two people, and one of them just doesn't love the other one. That is unrequited love. And unfortunately, many times that ends in tragedy. What is a star-crossed lover? A star-crossed or star-crossed lovers is a phrase that describes a pair of lovers whose relationship is often thwarted by outside forces. The term encompasses other meanings, but originally means the pairing is being thwarted by a malign star, or that the stars are working against the relationship. So, I don't know if any of you, are into astrology. Sometimes the stars just aren't aligned in the right direction, and it's like the person is almost fated to not have the relationship work out. Sometimes people, right? They say choose company, three is a crowd. Think about your high school relationships. Maybe there's that one person that's always jealous, doesn't want to see you happy, right? So this is usually an expression that's not associated with a happy couple. And that's something we're going to look at in Romeo and Juliet. Two-star. The setting is actually quite beautiful. Okay? It's in Verona, Italy, but it is in the late 1500s. So the customs, the culture, the language, okay, it's going to be quite different than what we're used to in 2020. Okay, this is a very long time ago. And some of the characters, we have two houses. We have the Capulets and the Montagues. And when you call it a house, think of like a family tree. Okay, so here are the Capulets, and then these are the characters that make up that particular quote-unquote house. There's Juliet Capulet, okay? She's a 13-year-old girl. There's Lord and Lady Capulet, Juliet's parents. There's Count Paris, the man Juliet's father wants her to marry. There is Tybalt, who's Juliet's cousin. And then there's the nurse. The nurse has been taking care of Juliet since she was a baby. In the second house, we have the Montagues. And there is Romeo Montagu, a young man, probably about 17 years old. We have Lord and Lady Montagu, who are Romeo's parents. We have Benvolio Montagu, who is Romeo's cousin. We have Mercutio, who is Romeo's best friend, and Friar Lawrence, who is a priest and a friend of Romeo. So he is a religious man. Whenever you see that friar, that usually notes religion. That is a clergyman. Now, in this next particular graphic, this is a graphic that I actually included in Schoology and also in your OneNote. And I like this particular graphic because you can see, your House of Capulets here, you have your House of Montagues here, and then you actually have symbols that represent each particular person. And it's a little hard for me to see, but you can see you have your swords here for the Lord Capulet and Lord Montagu, and the rings that represent the females. So the swords are male, the rings are female, and then you have Tybalt. He has a sword because he guards the House of Capulet, and then down here on the Montagu side, you have a servant to Romeo who guards him, who also has his sword. Okay, so these symbols, it's kind of nice that they represent a little bit of what these characters are. So I think this might help for those of you that are visual. If you're having a hard time keeping track of the characters, you might want to refer back to. So there are a ton of literary devices in Romeo and Juliet, and I pulled out some that I think are very specific to the play, and some that we really haven't learned, but I think would also help you next year, 10th grade, when you do Julius Caesar, especially if you have me for 10th grade, you'll do that. So picked out some terms that I think would be helpful. One of them you may already know, dramatic irony. I know we talk about irony a lot in your independent reading, so that might be a skill that can transfer from the independent reading to this play. So we'll start with a pun. Okay, a pun is a joke based on the use of word or words that has more than one meaning but has the same sound. So, for example, in the play, Mercutio says, "Nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance." And Romeo replies, "Not I, believe me. You have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead." And we have a play on that word soul. You have your shoe sole, which is spelled S-O-L-E, but then you have your soul inside of you, that is S-O-U-L. So that is a play on the word. Two words that have different meanings, are spelled differently, but sound alike. And the next one is a nemesis. And a nemesis is usually like an antagonist, somebody in the play that is going to have a conflict with the protagonist. And in this case, it's not a person, it's fate. So if you're wondering what fate is just events that are destined to be. So, I think there's a song, a very old song, you probably don't know it, by Alanis Morissette, and she says, things are ironic. You have a person that never gets on a plane, tries to avoid getting on a plane because he's fearful of crashing, and then the one time he does get on the plane, it crashes and he dies, which is very ironic. But it also could be the workings of fate that caused that plane to go down. You can't live your life thinking you're in control when fate is in control. There's that idea in life that what's meant to be is meant to be, and that's that belief in fate. So I don't know if any of you have ever said that, what's meant to be will happen. Well, that's fate. Can you tempt fate? Can you change fate? That's going to determine the course of the events in this play. Then you have dramatic irony. You see dramatic irony a lot in movies, especially horror movies, because let's say that you have that murderer that's hiding in the girl's closet, and then all of a sudden she enters into the bedroom, and you, the audience, you know that this murderer is in the closet, but she doesn't. So you're privy to information that she doesn't know. And that builds suspense and dramatic irony, because it's ironic that you know that murderer is there in the closet, but she doesn't. And that's how it works in Shakespeare's plays. Many times the audience is there, and the audience knows exactly what's going to happen. The characters don't. And that's going to be something that we look at very carefully in this play. Catastrophe. Catastrophe is the final event in a drama. So we will see a catastrophe at the end. Comic relief is a bit of humor that's injected into a serious play to relieve tension. Okay, so sometimes, if you're watching a really serious movie sometimes, I think it was Steel Magnolias maybe that I watched, and it was so sad, I'm crying, and then all of a sudden somebody does something funny and it makes you laugh. That's comic relief. Aside. An aside is something that Shakespeare used a lot in his plays, and it's a line that's whispered to the audience or to another character that's on stage. It's not meant to be heard by all the other characters, though. Abraham says, "Do you bite your thumb at us, sir?" And Samson says, as an aside to the audience, okay, but Abraham can't hear him, he says, "No, sir, I do not bite my thumb at you, sir, but I bite my thumb, sir." So that's something that the audience hears, but the character doesn't. Now, in a movie, you might be able to do that with special effects, but when you have a play that's done in the 1500s, you just don't have that luxury. So that's the way that they handled characters' thoughts, was really by using this aside. A soliloquy is when a single character, solo, right, one, a single character on stage thinks out loud. It's a way of letting the audience know what's in the character's mind. And again, with special effects, we could do those kinds of things today. In a book, you know the character's thoughts through their narration. How do you do that in a play? You would do it with a soliloquy. And then finally, tragic flaw. That is a character's trait that leads to his or her downfall or death. And that's something that I talked about in an earlier slide. But there it is again for you to see, tragic flaw. There are many, many, many themes in Romeo and Juliet, many of them. We're only going to focus on a couple, just to make things a little bit manageable. So we're going to see a dichotomy. A dichotomy, two things, okay, usually opposing things, like light and dark, night and day, and love and hate. So love and hate is a dichotomy that we're going to look at in Romeo and Juliet. We're going to see that there are different types of love. There's true love. There's childish love and puppy love. Okay, love in this play becomes a violent and drastically overpowering force that clouds rational judgment. Okay, when love interferes with the way you think and you can't think clearly, that's the kind of love we're going to look at in this play. And we're going to look at hate. We have two families that hate each other, and they're constantly feuding. And no one knows the reason for all the chaos. Romeo and Juliet's love is constantly threatened by a society that is full of hate. And then finally, we're going to look at the mechanism of fate. And it works in all of the events, how it works in all of the events that surround Romeo and Juliet's life. Fate works in the form of the family feud, right? It's really kind of crazy that these two people fall in love, but the families are feuding, right? Fate works in the timing of Friar Lawrence's letter. We're going to see that that's very important in the way that the events of this play pan out. These events are not coincidences, but they are indications of fate that is brought about by tragedy. So why do we read Romeo and Juliet today? Think about everything we talked about. How can this story connect to the lives of teenagers today? Obviously this is tragic, and we don't, want teenagers today to have this kind of a tragic end. But these are universal themes. We read Shakespeare because of these universal themes. And we might be looking at this, themes of love and hate. And Julius Caesar, you're going to look at themes of power struggles, and ego and pride. These are natural human traits and human characteristics. And that is why we do Shakespeare, because these are timeless, universal themes. I really hope